You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now present the Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi.
Welcome to the Health Hub on Radio Maria Canada, exploring cutting-edge health and wellness information and therapies, helping you to take your health to the next level. I'm your host, Kathy Biasi, and I'm an holistic nutritionist and a professional cancer coach. Today on the Health Hub, my guest is Yogi Aaron, and we will be talking about a revolutionary approach to eliminating pain in the body that ditches stretching in favor of igniting alignment, power, and purpose through muscle activation. Yogi Aaron is a trailblazing yoga teacher who was leading a global rebellion against the harmful practice of stretching. He pioneered the groundbreaking approach to yoga that shows people how to live pain-free by activating muscles through applied yoga, anatomy, and muscle activation. In a world where conventional stretching and flexibility practices are the prescribed norm for pain, Yogi Aaron's unorthodox methods provide a safer and more effective permanent solution. And what sets him apart is his wisdom, his infectious humor, adventurous spirit, and personal healing journey, which distinguish him as a beloved leader in the yoga community and at his Blue Osa Yoga Retreat in Costa Rica. For a lot of us, stretching is part of our exercise plan. Stretching is what we do to get the kinks out. And Yogi Aaron is offering us today an alternative to this and the reasoning why he feels that stretching is actually doing more harm than good. So that is the key part to our conversation, why stretching for pain relief is not the answer. We talk about muscle stability versus muscle flexibility, the difference between those two concepts and which one is more important for relieving pain, and how flexibility can lead you in a path that is not conducive to healing. So this is really something different than a lot of us might be used to. This is definitely an approach to the left. Very worthwhile listening to. It's a very interesting avenue that Yogi Aaron takes us down and makes a lot of sense once you get to the main purpose and reasoning about why he feels that stretching is something that may need to be avoided in situations. Stay tuned with us. We will be back in just a few minutes to speak with Yogi Aaron.
You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now continue with the program, The Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi.
Welcome back to the Health Hub, everybody. Today's show has been recorded, so no opportunity for calling in. Please do follow us on our social sites. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we are at the Health Hub RNC on all those locations. Yogi Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, Kathy.
Well, it's a great topic, a great left turn that you make within the health space, because we are going to go down this kind of an unorthodox pathway of your teachings on, flexibility, stretching, pain management. And so for someone to kind of go left from where everyone's gone right, there has to be a history behind this. So if you can kind of fill us in on that, and we can really start diving into some really interesting thoughts and therapies that you've brought forward.
Yeah, sure. I got into yoga, I think, for the same reason that a lot of people get into yoga, because I felt like I needed to stretch. And I felt like I needed to stretch for kind of two reasons. One was to stay healthy, and the other was to stay young. And when I say young, we kind of, I think, perceive youth as something that exudes mobility. I hate the word flexibility, but we'll use flexibility here. But there's freedom of movement. And when I turned 18, I remember feeling that rigidity already starting to settle in. And being someone who was sort of a visionary, even at that age, I kind of projected myself into the future, partly because I would look to my grandfather who moved like a stiff piece of wood. And I thought, I do not want to become him. So I got into yoga to avoid that, to stay mobile. And very quickly, I had ended up hurting myself. But I never really put two and two together. And it would take me 25 years to do that. Over that 25 years, I stretched more. I did these programs where you would hold stretches for long periods of time. I would
well, there's a particular yoga for that, right? For the long 5-minute stretches.
There is one that is branded, and they've kind of, gone on the bandwagon. It's called yin yoga. And so I got into yin yoga. On the outside, to be honest with you, it makes some sense. Like you look at that and you go, yeah, why wouldn't I want to open my fascia? Why wouldn't I want to break some of that tight tissue down? And so I did that. And actually the year leading up to me ending up in the hospital, this was after 25 years, I ended up in the hospital with an orthopedic surgeon telling me that I was probably going to need a spinal fusion in my lower back. And leading up to that year specifically, I had really committed myself to an intense yin style practice where I was doing these long, intense holds. And I would feel good when I would do them. There was like some temporary relief of pain, but after 30 minutes, an hour and a half, the pain would always come back, with a vengeance, worse than it was before. And then sometimes by the next morning, I could barely walk or get out of bed. So that was kind of like the turning point when I had to be honest with myself and say, what don't I know? And what don't I understand about the body? What is it in the yoga world that we don't understand? And what is it that I need to do to help me? Because the last thing, I was 45 at the time, I'm 52 now. And I mean, the idea of getting a spinal fusion at that age was just absolutely terrifying to me, and also ridiculous. I had spent my whole life dedicated to avoiding that sort of thing. So anyways, that's what led me to it.
Well, what is stretching obviously is the turning point for you. Now, I think in a lot of people's minds, stretching is the loosening of our fascia and muscles. Okay, which sounds lovely. It's been back and forth if you stretch before exercise, after exercise. But what in particular have you learned about stretching that you don't like and that you advise people against?
So the one point I feel like I must make is, and then I'm going to come back to your question, is that there has been no evidence to prove that stretching is good before and after. And this is the fundamental problem. Now, you can go on to some of these websites. What's that big hospital? The name just escaped me. But like Harvard Medicine, you can go on
Cleveland Clinic, that type of a place.
Cleveland Clinic. There's another one that, again, the name just gone, but it'll come back to me at the end of the interview. And they will have articles on their website saying that it's good, but they'll never have any citation. And so a lot of those articles are just puff pieces to drive SEO to their blogs. If you know what you're looking at, you recognize really quickly it's just SEO content. It's got no substantial claims, but because it's on Harvard, people go, oh, it must have some validity, but they're just repeating, the narrative. And somebody said that it was good. Somebody else agreed with them. A couple of doctors said it one day, and then all of a sudden it becomes, part of our conversation, but there is no evidence. One of the things that I did when I started having this conversation with people was I tried to do deep dives into any kind of literature that would show that stretching was good. And the literature either demonstrated that it had no bearing at all, or it actually made you worse. And so then the question is, what is stretching doing to you? And why am I in disagreement with it? The first question we have to really ask is, why is there tightness in the first place? And so why is the fascia tight? Why are the muscles tight? So what is the tightness biomechanically? When the body senses instability, when the body doesn't feel stable, it will go into a protective state. And part of that protective state is to tighten up. So I got into yoga, I got into stretching because my hamstrings were really tight. And so what I was endeavoring to do, although I didn't realize it at the time, and for the following 25 years, I was really treating a symptom. I was never treating the cause. My body felt unstable. And so it was like sending an SOS message, tighten up, tighten up, tighten up. And so some people might just turn to me and say, well, Aaron, just relax a little bit more. And you hear yoga teachers say this nonsense. Oh, just relax, and
take
your
a deep
hamstrings
breath.
will like your listeners can't see me, but I'm raising my middle finger right now to all those yoga teachers. I mean, it's just such a nonsense thing to say. If you step out on ice, if you step on ice and slip, what does your body do? It tightens up. So this happens at the autonomic level. It happens at an unconscious level. You have no control over it. And so when your body senses instability, it will tighten up to go into that protective state. When we're trying to stretch those muscles that are in that tightened protective state, we're violating our body's own protective mechanisms. And more importantly, we're actually doing more harm than good, because we're forcing these muscles that are in a tightened state to do what their body doesn't want them to do. And we're never really treating the root cause, which is muscles not working in the first place. So in my case with the hamstrings, I was really dealing with quads that weren't working. My hip flexors weren't working. My trunk flexors, my core stabilizers weren't working properly. And so all of those muscles were not working. And because they weren't working, my hamstrings were tightening up. Actually, I dealt with tight psoas, tight glutes. I mean, the whole system was tight, but nothing was contracting properly to do what muscles are supposed to do. So what are muscles supposed to do? Muscles have to move bones, and muscles need to stabilize joints. And in order to do that, and this is such an important point, muscles need to shorten. So why on earth are we forcing muscles to elongate beyond what their capacity is, when what they actually need to do is be able to contract, and contract on demand? They need to be able to shorten properly. So that's kind of it in a nutshell about why I would steer people more towards getting muscles to start doing their job properly and start building up their ability to contract and contract on demand, as opposed to, okay, let's see how long we can make these muscles and improve our flexibility. Because when you improve flexibility always leads to more instability, and instability will always lead a person to injury, always.
The underlying mechanism for this, is it a joint that has been damaged? Is it lack of strength. So are we talking about a strength training program in order to improve? Does flexibility matter?
Flexibility doesn't matter.
Okay.
I would say to focus on stability, and I'll explain that in just a moment. And as my teacher Greg would say, when you have stability, you have all the mobility you could ever want. Yesterday, for example, yesterday I was getting ready for my walk and I was bending forward to grab my shoes off the floor. And I was like, oh, there's some tightness in my back and especially my hamstrings. Got on the floor, focused on my core stabilizer activations, got up, was able to bend forward, no problem. So as soon as we have stability, mobility will always come. Again, when the body tightens up, it's a protective mechanism. What leads to that muscle tightness, what leads to the body tightening up is instability and instability in the joint. And what causes that instability is stress, trauma, and overuse. So anytime that there's over amounts of stress in that joint, for example, the shoulder joint, the muscles supporting the shoulder are going to stop working. An extreme example of that will be led to frozen shoulder syndrome. If people that their shoulder tightness, their shoulder issues, other little muscles start to take over, like the rotator cuffs. They start to do all the job of the big muscles to stabilize that joint. That's going to create more stress, which then is going to create trauma. And that will inevitably cause a lot more problems. But it doesn't just cause problems in the shoulder. People that have shoulder issues usually will have some sort of tightness in the neck. Perhaps they have tightness in the upper back or pain in the upper back. So it's a chain reaction. When stuff starts happening at the hip joint, we start seeing issues at the knee joint and maybe even in the ankle joints and or lower back. So all of these areas are interconnected. When there's stress at a joint, we need to start dealing with it. And there's a couple of ways that you know that you're dealing with stress. The two big check engine lights is muscle tightness. Pay attention to muscle tightness. Don't try to stretch it out. Try to go in and go self. Why is that tightness there? What muscles aren't working properly? And then the second check engine light that comes on is pain. So pain is always an indicator that there's a problem and that muscles aren't doing their job. So to answer your question about strength training is not necessarily the answer. You want to, it is and it isn't. The real answer is you want to be able to start doing simple, slow, low impact is also important isometrics. So let me give you an example of an isometric for the glutes, something I mentioned earlier, the glutes not working. And, if I tested the force output of people's glutes, say I took a sample size of 1,000 people, I would be really hard pressed to find 10 out of 1,000 people's glutes that are working properly. So a lot of people's glutes just are not working, and such an important muscle. But a simple, very, very, very simple isometric, come up into bridge pose. So if you're lying on your back, your knees are bent, your feet are flat on the floor, and your arms are out to the sides like a T, then you just simply lift your hips up as high as you can. You'll feel your glutes squeeze them even more so. And that is an isometric. And you do that for 6 seconds and then repeat it 6 times. So doing stuff like this will start to turn these big muscle groups on so that they're able to contract and contract on demand.
So when we're doing stretching, tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, we're often not hitting the point. The muscle in the quads may be tight, but that's got nothing to do with the muscle. It's got something farther to do up the chain. So when we are trying to stretch an area out, we're missing the point. And okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Now, can I just make one more point though about that? Because a lot of your listeners are going, but I want to be able to put my foot behind my head. And I've just pulled that out as
as an example, I'm sure none of your listeners are thinking that, but I get that a lot. Like, I want to put my foot behind my head. How do I do that? And I think that we need to adjust our goals.
Well,
And
that's a lot of genetics going on there.
there's also a lot of genetics. It's also a lot of training. And those people that can put their foot behind their head have a lot of inherent instability. And most of them will need a hip replacement sometime in their life. So if you want to learn to put your foot behind your head, you can do it. Just know that there's going to be a big consequence from that. But the more important thing, and the reason why I brought this up, is when you say I want flexibility, try to start changing the word to mobility. Like, I want to be able to bend over and pick up my car keys that dropped on the floor with ease, without straining or without fear. I want to be able to navigate walking downstairs without fear. I want to navigate walking on uneven surfaces. I want to navigate reaching up and grabbing something in the cupboard with ease and without fear. So for me, the conversation is really more about functional mobility as opposed to this crazy idea of flexibility. And so I would just say, examine what you think of as flexibility and ask yourself why, and is it really important? What is it that I really want to have in my life? I think that what most people really want in their heart is to have mobility, to be able to have freedom of movement without fear of throwing their back out, without fear of hurting their knees, and without fear of damaging their body.
I totally agree. And, I think at that point, well, maybe we'll stop for a break here, because when we get back, I'd like you to address key pain points that so many people deal with that don't seem to get rectified. And what I'm talking about is foot pain, back pain. Those are the two big ones that come to mind for me. I see it all the time. I see, different ways, back pain. The first time I saw someone dealing with back, and they said, my chiropractor told me to bend over and try and touch my toes. And, they do that, and then they stand up, and it was like the pain intensified as they stand up. So we'll put that in for the next segment here. But I really would like to, for you to come and really share with us some of these really key areas of pain. Back pain is a horrible thing to deal with. And maybe you can give us your view on how we can work with that. So everyone will be back. We'll be back in just a few minutes, and we'll continue on with the show.
You are listening to The Health Hub here on Radio Maria Canada, a Catholic voice wherever you are. To contact us and be a part of the show, email thh@radiomaria.ca. We now continue with the program. Here once again is your host, Kathy Biasi.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking with Yogi Aaron, and we left off at a point where I think we need to introduce discussions of key areas of pain that so many people deal with, and your viewpoint on how to deal with those areas of pain. You have a tight IT band, let's use a foam roller. Your back and shoulders are tight, use the foam roller to get in there, or lay it along your spine. So those are very common things. I have a foam roller upstairs. They're very common things that people go to help relieve pain. And we also have to keep in mind this whole postural chain. You talked about if the shoulder is frozen, that impacts the neck. And then anytime you have an injury and your body closes in and goes small, you're going to be affecting your posture. And I don't think a lot of people realize that when you are affecting your posture, it's not just an aesthetic thing. This postural chain, this neurological chain, starting with the brain and right down the spine, is our communication network. Yeah. So it's very important that we address all of this. One of the key places that can just cripple a person is back pain. So
Yeah.
how do you go about, you said yourself, you have back pain. I don't know
Yeah.
if it can ever be cured. My husband goes to the chiropractor once a month because he hurt his back years ago and it's never been the same. Can it be fixed?
Yes.
Good. Good to hear.
Tell me,
and I'll tell him.
Well, and then the question is whether, not your husband specifically, but the generic sense, will your husband do the work? And that's the real question. Like, so there's two kinds of people out there. There's kinds of people that love the information and go, wow, and then never do anything about it. And then there's other people who are like, oh my God, I'm going to use this. And they become pain-free. I actually have been doing this now for about 7 years, more or less. I've never had one person come up to me and say, your exercises have caused me more pain. What you're doing is not helping. It always helps and it always works. Why is that? Because we start getting to the root of what the issues are. So with back pain, for example, a lot of the issues with back pain, the absolute wrong thing to do, or worst thing that you can do, is to try and bend over and stretch your back. That's just going to make it so much worse. And, or these people that, grab a band, lie on their back and put the band around their foot and try to stretch their hamstrings. And believe me, I've done all of that stuff.
And the hanging. What do you think about the hanging?
Well, that's a whole other conversation. Can we just put a pin in that?
Okay, we'll put a pin in that one.
But another thing that people do is foam rolling. And so they go, there's this whole story out there that somebody made up that tight IT bands are causing back pain. No, it's not the tight IT bands. And so what they do is they foam roll. Now, I'm sure that you can attest to this, that while you're doing the foam rolling, it's not usually a pleasant experience, but afterwards, there's kind of a high, there's a euphoria. So there is a feeling good afterwards. I asked my teacher very quickly when I got into studying muscle activation, I said to him, what do you think about foam rolling? And he said, well, Aaron, people who are foam rolling are always going to be foam rolling. They're still foam rolling. They never deal with the root of the problem. So let's just discuss that for a moment because it ties into back pain. A lot of issues with the tight IT bands has to do with the glutes not working properly. The glutes are not working. So what does the body do? It sends an SOS message, tighten up, tighten up, tighten up. If you actually look fascially, where the IT bands start, they actually connect right into where the glutes are. And so there's a good argument to be made that the IT bands actually try to begin mimicking the work of the glutes. What do the glutes do? They're hip extension. What do the IT bands do? They're supposed to be actually hip flexors. But if you think about it, they actually start to mimic hip extension. That's not what their job is. And so because they get so overused and stressed to maintain the stability of what the glutes should be doing, which are these huge muscles, especially if you're J-Lo, then you've got this muscle. What is it going to do? It's going to go into protective state and tighten up. If you want to solve the issues with your IT bands, get your glutes working properly and your IT tightness will disappear almost instantaneously. So we want to get the glutes working. That's a key ingredient for lower back pain. What do we often do to deal with lower back pain? We tend to stretch the glutes. We're forcing the glutes to lengthen beyond what their capacity is. We end up doing these hip openers. You see this a lot in yoga class. Oh, you've got hip pain. We need to open the hips. Think about what opening the hips means from a biomechanical perspective. When my mother went and got hip replacement surgery, by the way, because of yoga partially, that she got hip replacement surgery, what did the doctor do? What did the orthopedic surgeon do after he did the replacement? He actually opened her hip. He dislocated her hip. So that is not a good thing to have in your mind, that you want to have open hips. You actually want the muscles to be doing their job, which is holding the hips into place, properly so that you can go through your daily life with proper range of motion. So that's kind of like the short answer with back pain. You want to get those back muscles working. The other thing that you want to do as well, Kathy, is you want to be able to look at what are the opposite muscles. So whenever a muscle is tight, try to start asking yourself, what is the opposite to that muscle? So with me, I had tight hamstrings. The opposite muscle is the quads and the hip flexors, and they weren't working, so my hamstrings are tightening up. In the case of lower back, if the lower back muscles are tightening up, you want to make sure that the trunk flexors are working properly. A really great hack for your husband, by the way, whether or not he'll do it or not, that's another story, but is to come on the back and you bring your knees above your hips. You bring your hands towards your knees and then you press the knees into the hands. Mm-hmm. A lot of fitness trainers will do this as for building up the abdominals. It's actually a great muscle activation to get your core muscles fired up and working properly. You do that for 6 seconds and you do it 6 times. Get your husband to do that. Get your husband to also do bridge pose. And there's one more pose that's fantastic for the back, which is one that a lot of people hate to do, but is golden. It's called Superman pose. So you come onto your stomach and you lift your legs and your chest up as high as you can. You keep your arms down by your waist, but you just lift up as high as you can. Keep your legs as straight as possible. Do those 3 muscle activations every single day for 30 days and let me know how it goes.
I will get him to do that. I've written them down. I think too, knowing how to move properly is a key piece to back pain. I've seen him, and when his back, when he has a moment, it's because he's bent over improperly or picked something up improperly. And I think that's also a key is that we've learned not to move as our body wants to move. And another area that I have, remember that muscles move bones, and in order to do that, they have to shorten. So we can have a whole discussion about posture, and that's a whole detoured discussion. But from a muscle activation perspective, it's really important to make sure the muscles are doing their job. Muscles in your body, as you're going through ranges of motion, can contract and contract on demand. So if your husband is doing something, and he's bending over and he tweaks his back, it's not necessarily because his posture was bad as much as, the muscles that should be shortening as he's going through that range of motion are not contracting properly, thus stabilizing the bones and the joints as he's going through that range of motion. If they're not doing their job, stress is always going to follow. And that's how the problems of quote unquote throwing your back out start to happen. So that's really an important thing to remember. I think too, I want to get on to the feet, because I don't think enough attention is paid to the feet. But you can give me your opinion on this. I think, there's a difference between working through pain and making sure you keep moving. When we're in pain, we tend to go small. We tend to not move. We tend to, let's wait for the pain to go away. I personally, just with my own, I go at it, whether that's right, wrong, or the other. But your opinion on, so if we talk about the feet, the opinion on feet pain. You don't want to stop walking because you have feet pain. You don't want to stop walking because you've got a sore back. That's not the right approach, is it?
Well, I kind of get into a tricky area here because I agree with you, but I would also add this as kind of an addendum. So remember why you have pain in the first place. So pain is a result of stress, trauma, and overuse. As you know, when you have stress in the body will produce inflammation, and that inflammation is what's causing the pain. So the question then becomes, is what I'm doing going to create more stress? So if you, like, for example, if I have a bum knee, sometimes my knee will act up on me. And So I will just then be like, okay, as I'm walking, the pain is getting worse. So I have two choices. I can either stop, and because if I keep walking, I'm going to keep causing more stress at that joint, and it's just going to create a trauma at that point. Or I can stop and rest, or I can go, okay, self, what's going on here? What possible reasons are there? So I know enough anatomy to know, okay, my quads are supposed to be stabilizing the knee joint. I also have enough anatomy to know that my hamstrings, and more specifically my hip extensors, also play a crucial role in stabilizing that knee joint. And I can tell you this, by the way, from personal experience. I stop literally on the street and I'll do a couple of quick muscle activations. I'll do it standing because I'm not going to lie down on the street and do it. And 9.9 times out of 10, I'll get rid of the pain. Because the muscles start doing their job. Another example is like sometimes I'll start my walks and my inner groin will start to flare up. Well, the inner groin is the adductors. So I went to myself, what are the opposite muscles? The abductors, which is like glute med and TFL, our friend TFL. So I would just stop. It takes 1 minute to do a couple of muscle activations. Not only does the pain go away, it actually never came back during that walk. So the question then becomes, when we have pain, use it as a check engine light. Something is going on in your vehicle. If you're driving across the Mojave Desert and your check engine light starts going off, you probably don't want to keep going. You probably want to try and like pull over to the nearest gas station and find out what is going on before you push the car even more so. And the same thing with your body. You want to ask yourself all the time, is what I'm doing making me stronger? Is it actually improving muscle function, or is it, making me worse? Is it actually causing more stress?
Fair. I always tell people there is some movement. There is some movement,
Yes.
that you can be doing.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply like if you're on a broken leg, you go hopping down the street, but there's always there's always upper movement, because, movement is so many different things. Movement is making sure the fluids are going around your body.
Absolutely.
So many things. Now, before we get to the end of this show, I need you to talk about your interest in feet and why they play such an important role in overall posture, health, pain, everything.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I started teaching at Yama, I've had so many requests from people asking me to create something for feet. And I kind of put my toe into it a couple of times, but it really became sort of a passion project for me because I ended up having knee pain, and I was doing everything I thought I should be doing, and the pain wasn't going away. So I contacted one of my teachers who did this assessment. It was like, Aaron, the problem is coming from your foot. And if I'm honest, in yoga, we do these balancing poses where you stand on one leg, and I've always struggled with my right side. And it's gotten worse with age, and it's something I've just kind of ignored or pushed to the side. And so he immediately gave me some foot exercises to do. And not only did the knee pain go away, but my balance improved quite dramatically. And that was when I started to realize there's some things going on with the feet. So just to kind of like give your listeners a couple of just simple exercises for feet, I would just suggest take time and try and walk on grass once in a while without shoes on. That is so important, because when we wear shoes, there's like 40 something muscles in the feet, and all those muscles stop working when we wear shoes. So I'm not advocating, by the way, that you become a shoeless person. I'm just saying,
no, but I get it.
Try to create space to literally walk on grass. As some of my favorite commentators say, go out and touch grass once in a while, or sand. Sand is also really good too. And the other tip I have is like just practice doing some plantar flexion, like, just sitting down on with your legs straight out in front of you, just kind of point the toes. Those are two Very, 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 very simple things. My passion project led me to creating a wonderful series in the Yogi Club. People can contact me on Instagram and ask me for the link. I'll be more than happy to send it to them. But this kind of goes through all the things that you could be doing if you are dealing with foot pain. And I would even just add into that knee pain, because so much of what happens in the feet is affecting the hips. Even the lower back and the knees, and sometimes even the shoulders. So what's going on, it starts to affect what's going on all the way up the chain. So we need to get those muscles in the feet working. And the cool thing is, it doesn't take much to start turning those muscles on. I've actually seen people who do these exercises, these muscle activations, and get off of their orthotics very quickly, sometimes within a few weeks. It can be a game changer. So I'm not saying that you should go off your orthotics and start doing this. Start doing these and start noticing what kind of changes happen. And then you work with your own specialist to find out what would suit you. But start getting those muscles turning on in your feet, and you will notice a chain reaction in your whole body.
I broke my leg years ago, and I was in a cast for 6 months. And the worst pain I had and the hardest area for me to recover from was my foot. And I had to, the exercises were balancing. My arch went completely flat. So I totally understand how the foot and foot pain, I like my big toe hurt more than the break. I do totally understand the value of the feet, and there are sensory connection to the ground, and they feed us so much information. There's nothing in our body that doesn't have an extreme value that we need to overlook. Thank you so much.
This is a quick small tip. Check out posterior tibialis, and then hallucis extensor and flexor, and those are just 3 key muscles that would be a complete game changer for you to flip the script on that.
Well, and, a lot of people I know, myself included, because of all this, plantar fasciitis. I mean, that's immobilizing when it's bad.
Yes.
And, trying to figure out how to do that. And I was, sort of attacking my foot, and, people are saying it's farther up the chain. You've got to go farther up the chain. It's calf strength, and it's all these other things. But, oh my gosh, until you've experienced these things, and you don't think so much, plantar fascia, it's just a foot thing. Well, you've got to take care of all these areas, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's just you have to be mindful. And I think this is what you're bringing to the whole idea of stretching, is the mindfulness. And you're not hitting yoga. You're just trying to go at the type of yoga that's beneficial. So I just want to make that clear to everybody. Yoga is a huge piece of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yoga is not the sinner here. It's the practice and the different practices of it. So get the right teacher is what we're talking about. If people want to get a hold of you to find out more about you, do you do anything sort of online? Where can we reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, I have a foot series online. People can access that, contact me. The best way to contact me is on yogiaaron.com. I have a book out there called Stop Stretching, a new yogic approach to master your body and live pain-free, which is available on Amazon. They can also access it through my website, yogiaaron.com. And I have a ton of free content out there. I also have ways that people can start learning more about this. And that's what I really encourage people, empower yourself, you with your foot thing, you can overcome that. Your husband with his back thing, he can overcome it. My goal is not to really, be an evangelical about this, but it's with all sincerity. It breaks my heart to see people in pain, because I know what it's like to live with chronic pain. And I just want to show people a solid path to living their best pain-free life. So access the information, get, the free stuff out there, and just get plugged in.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that and everything you do. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, Kathy.
Everybody, we'll talk to you next week on The Health Hub.
You have been listening to The Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi, here on